Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Good to see people that we haven't seen for a while. So we're going to begin with the blessing for studying Torah. Let me move it over here. Here we go. All right. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Blessed are you, Adonai, our God, sovereign of all, who hallows us with mitzvot, commanding us to engage with words of Torah. I mean, la'asok b'divrei Torah is really, engaging, pouring into, which is what we do. I'm hoping that we can finish the second book of Samuel today. I don't know if we will or not, but there's a long poem in the middle of it, which, I don't think we have to linger on. There's also a long set of different battles and people who fought them. So I'm hoping we can get through that a little bit quickly because it's not so exciting. Anyway, but just to get us back to where we left off. Anybody remember what happened last time?
Did Absalom wage war against his father?
Yes, Absalom waged war against his father. And what happened to good old Absalom?
He got killed.
He got killed. Remember, he got first caught in some branches with his beautiful hair. Remember, as Chekhov said, if you have a gun in Act 1, it has to go off somewhere. You can't just have it there and not do something with it. So we had some attention paid to Absalom's hair, and that's what in the end got him, because he got stuck in this branch. And then, of course, he was killed by Joab, the general, who knew that you cannot allow somebody who's a rebel, even if it's a king's son, to keep going. David then mourns him, right? Mm-hmm. In a way that Joab tells him, hey, knock it off. Get a grip on yourself, man. You are the king of this country. You cannot mourn for someone who led a revolution against you or a civil war against you, right? David, as great a warrior as he was, as great an administrator, whatever his wonderful aspects were as a leader, he does not know how to deal with his kids at all, right? And the whole thing started, as you may recall, when Absalom's sister was raped by her half-brother, Amnon, who's another son of David, and David didn't do anything. And then he let Absalom go and stew for 2 years in the south, and did not do a whole lot to repair the relationship when Absalom came back. So, and remember, the prophet Nathan said to David, everything you did in private will be done to you in public. So, Amnon is the side of David that is, sexually, demanding and impulsive. I want that woman, I'm going to take her, right? That's what happened between David and Bathsheba. And then now Amnon does that with Tamar. And Absalom represents David's incredible desire for power and ambition. And remember, Absalom is at the gate and he's sort of telling people, hey, if I were in charge, things would be different. Yeah. And then he sleeps with David's concubines, which is, again, saying, screw you. I'm in a manner of speaking, right? So, and David doesn't know how to handle it. Just doesn't know. He just does nothing. So we're going to pick it up, unless anyone has any comments or questions before we pick up chapter 19 of 2 Samuel, the second book of Samuel. Okay. This is where the mourning is going to happen for Absalom, because, hi, Suzanne. Absalom, remember that where we left off specifically is where the messengers are coming to tell David that Absalom has been killed. And we do recall that in the past, messengers who brought bad tidings were killed. They actually literally killed the messenger, right?
Yeah, I was going to say there's an expression, don't kill the messenger.
Yeah, well, they do.
Come from that?
Yes, that's where it comes from. Or Ivan the Terrible, who had a wonderful way of dealing with messengers, which is that he would take his scepter, which was sharpened on the bottom, stab it through their foot while they delivered their message.
Oh,
then he had them killed. He
Yeah.
was terrible.
I think in Greek tragedy, this happens as well, no? The messenger gets killed. Okay, I think, excuse me, just one moment. Let me share this and then I have to let my cat out. Okay, so here we are with, so this is where the mourning is happening, right? So would someone like to read this? Chris, oh,
I'll read.
Susie, please, thank you.
It was told Joab, the king is weeping and mourning for Absalom. So the victory that day was turned into mourning for all the troops. For the troops heard that day, the king is grieving for his son. The troops stole into the city that day as soldiers steal, who are ashamed when they flee in battle. The king covered his face, and the king cried with a loud voice, "O my son Absalom, O Absalom, my son, my son." Then Joab came into the house to the king and said, "Today you have covered with shame the faces of all your officers who have saved your life today, and the lives of your sons and your daughters, and the lives of your wives and your concubine, for love of those who hate you and for hatred of those who love you. You have made it clear today that the commanders and officers are nothing to you, for I perceived that if Absalom were alive and all of us were dead today, then you would be pleased. So go out at once and speak kindly to your servants, for I swear by the Lord, if you do not go, not a man will stay with you this night, and this will be worse for you than any disaster that has come upon you from your youth until now." Then the king got up and took his seat in the gate. The troops were all told, "See, the king is sitting in the gate." And all the troops came before the king.
Okay, thank you. So this is where, David is mourning his son. Pretty famous line also, "Oh, my son Absalom, oh, Absalom," right? What's his name? Wrote a book, Absalom, Absalom.
William Faulkner.
Thank you, William Faulkner. Yes. Okay, so you see, he's weeping for his son, which is normal on the one hand. On the other hand, his son led a rebellion. Okay, and the people on the king's side fought to save the kingdom for David, and they don't want to see the king mourning the guy who led this rebellion and who resulted, because of the rebellion, in killing a lot of the guys on David's side, right? I mean, that's a morale, deflator. Here we've worked hard for you. We gave up lives for you. We were wounded, blah, blah, blah. And instead of saying to us, thank you, rally the troops and give them a nice speech, you're mourning the guy who was responsible for hurting us. And, Joab is a pretty tough guy. He's the general, right? He's also his nephew. But Joab, it's one thing for a prophet to speak truth to power, that sometimes they get jailed for it. But it's another thing for the general to say, hey, buck up, man. This is like really bad. It's not even just saying, look, you need to go talk to the troops and say some good things to them. He's saying you're shaming us. This is shameful, right? You're bringing shame onto us. And, you're acting like if Absalom had won, you'd be happier than his defeat. So again, trying to get him to engage in realpolitik, not in father mourning his son. Remember, let me ask you a question. Does anybody remember what happened when Aaron's sons died? So this is in the book of Leviticus. It happened just a few weeks ago. God has just given instructions to the Israelites about how to run the cult, right? Everything has to be done in a very, very specific way. And Aaron's sons, Aaron is the high priest, Aaron's sons offer strange fire and they get zapped. What does Aaron do? He actually doesn't do
He
anything.
doesn't mourn, does he?
Doesn't mourn,
He
he
just
doesn't
goes
say,
on. He's the chief
No.
priest.
He
exactly.
doesn't mourn them.
Yep. He doesn't mourn them at all. Internally, yes, I'm sure he does. Externally, he's got a job to do. It sounds harsh, but and that's kind of an extreme situation because it happens right away and they didn't rebel against the whole kingdom. But still in all, that's the example that we're apparently supposed to follow. Listen, I was just reading something about the Colleyville thing, the kidnapping and all that happened a few months ago. The rabbi who was there, you imagine that, he was pretty freaked out about what happened, but being the leader and having congregants with him there and having a crazy person there who wanted to maybe kill them, you just have to, decide that you're going to deal with your emotions later. Right now, we got to get through this, right? So that's what a leader has to do. And David is really not good at that. Any comments before we go on? Okay. Oh, Christine, go ahead.
The leader basically has to become a mother in a crisis, right?
That's true. That's true. You're absolutely
I'll
right.
have my breakdown next week.
Absolutely.
I'm
There's a time and
using
place for
mother
things.
metaphorically. I'm including all genders in that role.
Yeah. Absolutely. Okay, so we're going to go on. All righty.
David.
Meanwhile,
All the Israelites had fled to their homes. All the people were disputing throughout all the tribes of Israel, saying, "The king delivered us from the hand of our enemies and saved us from the hand of the Philistines. And now he has fled out of the land because of Absalom. But Absalom, whom we anointed over us, is dead in battle. Now, therefore, why do you say nothing about bringing the king back?" King David sent this message to the priests Zadok and Abiathar. "Say to the elders of Judah, why should you be the last to bring the king back to his house? The talk of all Israel has come to the king. You are my king, my kin. You are my bone and my flesh. Why then should you be the last to bring back the king? And say to Amasa, are you not my bone and my flesh? So may God do to me and more if you are not the commander of my army from now on in place of Joab." Amasa swayed the hearts of all the people. Sorry. Where am I?
Amasa swayed the hearts
Of all the people of Judah as one, and they sent word to the king, "Return, both you and all your servants." So the king came back to the Jordan, and Judah came to Gilgal to meet the king and to bring him over the Jordan. Shimei, son of Gera, a Benjaminite from Bahurim, hurried to come down with the people of Judah to meet King David. With him were 1,000 people from Benjamin and Ziba, the servant of the house of Saul, with his 15 sons and his 20 servants, rushed down to the Jordan ahead of the king while the crossing was taking place, to bring over king's household and to do his pleasure.
Okay, thank you. So first of all, let me just point something out here. So Joab was saying to the king, hey, go talk to the troops. What does the king do? He goes and sits at the gate, which is not exactly a very active thing to do. All right, just point that out. All right. Now, everybody's like sort of confused. Like, wait a minute, we just had this battle and the king is mourning Absalom. I mean, like, what's going on, right? I mean, people are confused. Now, he's got the Israelites behind him, but the tribe of Judah, which is the tribe that he's from, it's not so clear because Absalom began the rebellion from that tribe. So here what he's doing is Amasa, who's also one of his nephews. Amasa was the head of Absalom's army. And he's now putting Amasa in charge of the whole army instead of Joab, because he's trying to get the Judahites behind him. So that's not a terrible move, although Amasa was just on the other side. Who says he's gonna, come over to David's side? But anyway, he's giving him this, sort of special position to get that part of the country on his side. So he is doing some maneuvering. That's good. I mean, I don't know what Joab's going to say about that. Joab is not one of these guys who's going to just kind of shrink back and say, oh, someone else is in charge. But in any event, it's, as I said, trying to get the loyalty of the Southern tribe to join in now that they've been defeated. Okay. Any questions or comments? Okay. Shimei had been on the other side before. Okay. So now let's see what happens with him. Do you want to keep going, Susie?
Yeah. Shimei, son of Gera, fell down before the king as he was about to cross the Jordan and said to the king, may my Lord not hold me guilty, or remember how your servant did wrong on the day my Lord, the king, left Jerusalem. May the king not bear in mind, for your servant knows that I have sinned. Therefore, see, I have come this day, the first of all the house of Joseph, to come down to meet my Lord the king. Abishai, son of Zeruiah, answered, shall not Shimei be put to death for this, because he cursed the Lord's anointed? But David said, what have I to do with you, you sons of Zeruiah, that you should today become an adversary to me? Shall anyone be put to death in Israel this day? For do not I know that I am this day king over Israel? The king said to Shimei, you shall not die. And the king gave him his oath.
So the king is forgiving people who were his enemies before. Again, I think politically that's a good move. I mean, you don't want to start slaughtering all kinds of people right and left, right? And, maybe sparing his life will make him even more loyal than he would have otherwise been. And now remember, this guy Mephibosheth, remember, he was the son of Jonathan, Saul's son. And this other guy had ratted on him, Ziba. Ziba had said, remember, he got all of Mephibosheth's territory from David. So it's not entirely clear, was this guy Mephibosheth still loyal to David or not? So let's see what he has to say.
Mephibosheth, grandson of Saul, came down to meet the king. He had not taken care to his feet or trimmed his beard or washed his clothes from the day the king left until the day he came back in safety. When he came from Jerusalem to meet the king said to him, why did you not go with me? I have trouble with that name.
Yeah, it's not easy.
Yeah, he answered, my Lord, O king, my servant deceived me, for your servant said to him, saddle a donkey for me so that I may ride on it and go with the king, for your servant is lame. He has slandered your servants to my Lord the king. But my Lord the king is like the angel of God. Do therefore what seems good to you. For all my father's house were doomed to death before my Lord the king. But you set your servant among those who eat at your table. What further right have I then to appeal to the king? The king said to him, why speak any more of your affairs? I have decided you and Ziba shall divide the land. Mephibosheth said to the king, let him take it all, since my lord the king has arrived home safely.
So the fact that he hasn't trimmed his beard or washed his clothes is a mourning. It's a mourning rituals. MOURNING, although it sounds like ugh, I wouldn't want to get too close to him. So he was in mourning, and apparently this is a proof that he was really loyal to King David the whole time, right? He was in mourning until King David came back safely. So he's also been loyal. So, you know, at this point, David is gathering all of his, you know, ducks, putting them in order, making sure people are going to be loyal and not going into any more bloodshed. Okay, Mark has his hand up. Let's see what, go ahead, Mark.
So you mentioned that it's a good political move, but sort of like Moses and Jethro, it's always not a bad idea to share responsibility. If you're giving out land, then you're not responsible for that land, at least in theory. So
Well,
it's not
right,
just-
but in this case, the Ziba and Mephibosheth issue is that Ziba had gone to David a few chapters back and said, you know, Mephibosheth is not being loyal to you, and David gave him Mephibosheth's possessions, and now they're saying we'll divide it. But yeah, I mean, yeah, you're right. I mean, you don't want to have everything, you know, dependent on one person. That's absolutely true. But you know, I think it's politically astute to do what he's doing right now. So he still has a little glimmer of that left in him. He is getting older now. I'm not sure how old he is at this point, but he's, you know, he's starting to fade a bit. Anybody else? Let me look. No? Okay. So David's kindness to Barzillai. Do you want to keep going, Susie, or do you want someone to step in?
Can somebody else take over?
Sure. Who would like to read?
I can read, Rabbi.
Great.
Now, Barzillai the Gileadite had come down
Sorry.
from Gilead. He went on with the king to the Jordan to escort him over the Jordan. Barzillai was a very aged man, 80 years old. He had provided the king with food while he stayed at Mahanaim, for he was a very wealthy man. The king said to Barzillai, "Come over with me, and I will provide for you in Jerusalem at my side." But Barzillai said to the king, "How many years have I still to live that I should go up with the king to Jerusalem? Today I am 80 years old. Can I discern what is pleasant and what is not? Can your servant taste what he eats or what he drinks? Can I still listen to the voice of singing men and singing women? Why then should your servant be an added burden to my lord the king? Your servant will go a little way over the Jordan with the king. Why should the king recompense me with such a reward? Please let your servant return so that I may die in my own town near the graves of my father and my mother. But here is your servant Himham. Let him go over with the Lord the king and do for him whatever he seems good, or whatever seems good to you." The king answered, "Himham shall go over with me, and I will do for him whatever seems good to you, and all that you desire of me I will do for you." Then all the people crossed over the Jordan, and the king crossed over. The king kissed Barzillai and blessed him, and he returned to his own home. The king went on to Gilgal, and Himham went on with him. All the people of Judah and also half the people of Israel brought the king on his way. What
So-
I find
yeah.
interesting
Sure.
about this, Rabbi,
Yes.
is when you're 80, you're old. This is a really new definition of old. I mean, look at Methuselah and even Abraham, these people that lived to 120. you know.
And look at the people
170.
running our country too.
Yeah. So 80 is old. It's really a new definition of old. It's much more realistic than what we've
Yeah.
been seeing in the Torah.
Well, we know that 120 is this ideal age that you know, I'm sure nobody lived to.
Jane, watch what you say because you'll be 82 also. You'll be 80.
Well, I'll be 80 in 2 years. I'm looking forward to it because it should initiate in, if I'm anything like my mother, another 18 years. So, you know, but I was just
You're just contrasting it with
little
120.
Rashi thing there of what is old in the Bible, you know, and
Yeah.
how the definition is now changed.
Yeah. So it's interesting. Whereas I think what David did with Ziba and Mephibosheth was a smart move. Robert Alter doesn't think so. Wait, I just saw it. Wait. Oh yeah. So in verse 30, where David says, "Why should you still speak your words?" David cuts off Mephibosheth impatiently, picking up the still that the anxious supplicant has just used twice. And he says, "You and Ziba shall divide the field." This quote, Solomonic judgment, may actually be another sign that David has lost his ruler's grip. For if Ziba has told the truth about his master, Mephibosheth, as a traitor, would deserve nothing except perhaps capital punishment. And if Ziba was lying, then the servant would deserve nothing except a harsh legal penalty for defamation, right? So Ziba either was telling the truth that Mephibosheth was a traitor, in which case he should get nothing and be killed, or Ziba was lying, in which case he should get some sort of penalty for lying. Perhaps Mephibosheth is paying a price for having betrayed that he thought David was responsible for the deaths of the Saul people. In this reading, David knows Mephibosheth is telling the truth, but he punishes him for assuming David was involved in the killings by decreeing that Mephibosheth will lose half his property. I mean, I think there are a lot of ways of reading this. I mean, Mark read it differently as well. You know, what David is doing right now is he's trying to get everybody on his side, and he's forgiving, and he's trying to, you know, get past this civil war and all this, you know, punishment and killing and all that. So to me, that's a smart move, but I'm not a king, so what do I know? And Alter also contrasts the kiss that he gives to Barzillai, which seems like a very warm kiss, to the very cold kiss that Absalom received from his father. Remember when Absalom came back from being in exile for 2 years, David gives him a very sort of curt, you know, hello and kiss, and like doesn't really see him again. So that's kind of interesting too. All right. Any other comments before we move on? No. Okay. Let's go down here. The last part of this chapter. Okay, Jane, you want to finish it?
Yeah. Then all the people of Israel came to the king and said to him, "Why have our kindred, the people of Judah, stolen you away and brought the king and his household over the Jordan and all David's men with him?" All the people of Judah answered the people of Israel, "Because the king is near of kin to us. Why then are you angry over this matter? Have we eaten at all at the king's expense, or has he given us any gift?" But the people of Israel answered the people of Judah, "We have 10 shares in the king, and in David also we have more than you. Why then did you despise us? Were we not the first to speak of bringing back our king?" But the words of the people of Judah were fiercer than the words of the people of Israel.
So when they say we have 10 shares in the king, meaning there are 10 tribes in the north.
Right.
Now, what's interesting to me about all of this is, as we will eventually get, maybe, to the splitting of the kingdom into two, north and south, there's been a problem between the north and south from the very beginning. It never gets resolved. It finally results in the breaking up of the kingdom. And eventually it results in the northern kingdom being taken over by Assyria and the tribes disappearing altogether. which, does that sound like anything familiar to you in our own history? I mean, the North and the South not really ever resolving the difference. I mean, there's a civil war, the North wins, the issues are still underlying the whole thing. And we still see, things that are going on in the South, laws that are passed that are very different from many of the Northern states. It never really gets completely healed, resolved, or whatever. And here we see that in, just as much from the very beginning, right? Which is the tribe, or which is the, part of the kingdom that has the most claim on the king, or that is the most legitimate? Christine?
Well, yeah. Plus, you have the Lincoln thought he was being magnanimous, and so did Grant, by not having war crimes, hangings, and so on and so forth, which could have happened to all of the Southern elite, and didn't do it. But on the other hand, when there was the war, Sherman's march to the sea was really scorched earth. It was really what Putin's doing in Mariupol.
Mhm.
So, but how do you respond to the end of a civil war?
Right,
How do you resolve differences when you don't even address them?
right. And again, this is something that just starts way, way back, and it just keeps going, and same thing in our country, right?
Mhm.
The South and part of the Midwest and whatever, I mean, they have a different approach to life than those of us in the North, shall we say. And, right now with the whole abortion thing, it's playing itself out all over again. And I don't have the answer. Again, I'm not a king or anybody who really could lead a country. So I don't know how you resolve it. I really don't.
I think that it basically, when things get resolved, they would get resolved by splitting. And we're thinking, my friends and I, Canada could be U-shaped.
Right. That's I like that idea.
the sort of good luck horseshoe of Canada.
Yeah.
And leave the other, I mean, I call them yahoos, that's not nice, but you leave the people who are basically the Republic of Gilead, to their own devices.
Yeah.
And welcome refugees.
Yeah. Nice fantasy.
I know.
So the next chapter is really kind of the last chapter in this narrative, because when we get to the last 3 chapters of the book, they're kind of a different author, and it's kind of weird. We'll talk about that when we get there. So we're going to go to chapter 20. And Jane, you want to keep reading, or do you want to?
Sure, I'll read. Now a scoundrel named Shabah, son of Bichri, a Benjaminite, happened to be there. He sounded the trumpet and cried out, "We have no portion in David, no share in the son of Jesse. Everyone to your tents, O Israel." So all the people of Israel withdrew from David and followed Sheba, son of Bichri, but the people of Judah followed their king steadfastly from the Jordan to Jerusalem.
So notice we had the northern tribe saying we have 10 shares in David, and now this guy's saying we don't have any share in David. So things are not sorted out yet. Okay.
David came to his house at Jerusalem, and the king took the 10 concubines whom he had left to look after the house and put them in a house under guard and provided for them, but did not go into them. So they were shut up until the day of their death, living as in widowhood. These are the 10 that Absalom raped.
Exactly. Right? That the ones that Absalom slept with, I don't know if he raped them, but he slept with them. And, they're now damaged goods in many different ways. And just the way, remember what happened with Michal at the end of their relationship. She was very angry at David, and they never slept together again and didn't have any children. And now these poor women, just like Tamar, by the way,
Yeah.
you know, shut away. I mean, this is horrible the way women are treated here, but you know, shut away until the day of their death. What kind of life is that, right? Anyhow, that's how women were treated, and we seem to be going back to that place in this country. But
Yes,
hopefully-
we do seem to be going back.
yeah. All righty. Now remember, Amasa is now the head of his army. Doesn't mean he's really the one with all the power, but he is the head of his army.
Then the king said to Amasa, call the men of Judah together to me within 3 days and be here yourself. So Amasa went to summon Judah, but he delayed beyond the set time that had been appointed him. David said to Abishai, now Sheba, son of Bichri, will do us more harm than Absalom. Take your Lord's servants and pursue him, or he will find fortified cities for himself and escape from us. Joab's men went after him along with the Cherethites, the Pelethites, and all the warriors. They went out from Jerusalem to pursue Sheba, son of Bichri. When they were at the large stone that is in Gibeon, Amasa came to meet them. Now Joab was wearing a soldier's garment, and over it was a belt with a sword in its sheath fastened at his waist. As he went forward, it fell out. Joab said to Amasa, is it well with you, my brother? And Joab took Amasa by the beard with his right hand to kiss him. But Amasa did not notice the sword in Joab's hand. Joab struck him in the belly so that his entrails poured out on the ground and he died. He did not strike a second blow.
Okay, so let's stop here for a
Wasn't
moment.
necessary.
So not necessary when your entrails are coming out, right?
Yeah, right.
There've been a few scenes like this where people get stabbed in the stomach, and
Yeah.
So, all right, first of all, again, this is Robert Alter. So now Sheba, son of Bichri, will do us more harm than Absalom. Okay, although it's not clear why Amasa is late for his appointed meeting with David, right? It said he was late. We don't know why. Perhaps his appearance at Gibeon in verse 8 suggests that he decided out of military considerations to pursue Sheba at once without reporting back to the king. In other words, we don't know. Did he go do it? Did he not? But according to Alter, David's unjustified panic, in other words, he sends somebody else instead, is another indication that he has lost his political composure. By sending out Abishai, Joab's brother, to give chase after Sheba, he sets up the circumstances for Joab's murder of Amasa and his subsequent return to power. So, you know, by David doing this, he messes up the whole thing. Now, this is really chutzpahdik, right? Amasa has been named the head of the army, but Joab is bringing warriors with him. And he says, Alter is crediting J.P. Fokelman for seeing what an extraordinary designation this is. David has dismissed Joab. The elite warriors are in any case David's men. Note how David has just referred to them in addressing Abishai as your master's servants. The fact that they are here called Joab's men suggests where the real power is and where Joab's brother Abishai assumes it must be. The clear implication is that the supposedly dismissed Joab is actually leading his men in the pursuit. So, and again, you know, this was in, I think it was in the book of Judges, where somebody came to that big fat guy. I can't remember who it was. He was the enemy. And they also, you know, with the left hand, because you usually use your right hand for a sword. With his left hand, he stabbed him in the stomach. And the same thing happened. Kind of underhanded, not to make a play on words, but, you know, now Joab's in charge again. Okay.
Then Joab and his brother Abishai pursued Sheba, son of Bichri. And one of Joab's men took a stand by Amasa and said, whoever favors Joab and whoever is for David let him follow Joab. Amasa lay wallowing in his blood on the highway, and the man saw that all the people were stopping. Since he saw that all who came by him were stopping, he carried Amasa from the highway into the field and threw a garment over him. Once he was removed from the highway, all the people went on after Joab to pursue Sheba, son of Bichri.
Okay, so I have a note here that I wrote down about, so the left hand is usually not where you hold your weapon. And this is who, in Judges 3, Ehud, who was one of the judges, kills the Moabite king Eglon in the belly with the left hand. You may remember that from a long time ago. And it's also a blow to the belly that Abner's brother Asahel died, and in the same place in Gibeon, and by a thrust to the belly that Joab killed Abner. So Joab has done a few of these belly killings in the past. And Gibeon is the place where the first battle occurred between the house of Saul and the house of David. So that's something to keep in mind. And yeah, okay. So we've seen the belly killing before. We've seen the underhanded use of the left hand. Somebody wrote in the chat. So Stacy says, is it significant that it keeps repeating that Sheba is son of Bichri? I don't know for sure. I think, a lot of times people are designated by son of, and I'm not sure that that is important here. And if it is, I don't know, but I didn't see anything indicating that in the notes that I looked at. So Mark, yes, let's stop for a second. And Mark, go ahead.
It seems that in 2 Samuel, when there's a holiday, it's not only for you, but it's for your manservant, it's for your maidservant, it's for your, my friend, my ass and my donkey. But here we have someone that was killed, injured, and just sort of shoved to the side because they're a distraction. I mean, that's like running the full gamut of human behavior in the social environment.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, because Amasa is also related to David, and to treat his body that way is a desecration. And we know that even people, even Haman and his sons being hung, right? That they were taken down, and the same thing with Saul's sons, when they were killed, you take down the body and you don't just let it hang there and rot. And in this case, they just kind of cover him up on the highway and, kind of ignore him, which is really, a terrible way to treat a body. So it's pretty brutal. A lot of the stuff is very brutal, as we've noticed, right? I mean, starting with, let's say, Deuteronomy, and then going into Joshua and Judges and, Samuel. I mean, there's a lot of blood, there's a lot of killing. And how much has changed in the last few thousand years?
Nothing.
Yeah.
Where's the Shalom Bayit they speak of?
Yeah, really.
Amongst the clans. It's just not there.
Yeah. Well, Joab is not interested in Shalom Bayit. And we'll see that actually when we get to the book of Kings, and there's a question about the succession to King David. More fighting and sibling rivalry from day one, right? Cain and Abel never stops. Okay, let's, I'm telling you, they should be banning this book, not, the books about, Johnny has two mothers. Anyway, okay. Here we are.
Sheba passed through all the tribes of Israel to Abel of Beit Maacah, and all the Bichrites. So there is a footnote there.
Okay, the footnote is Makkah means hitting. Let's see what it says here. Oh, they're just giving you variant ways of spelling it.
Oh, okay.
Or comparing it to, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, nothing all that exciting.
Okay. Assembled and followed him inside. Joab's forces came and besieged him in Abel of Beit Maacah. They threw up a siege ramp against the city, and it stood against the rampart. Joab's forces were battering the wall to break it down. Then a wise woman called from the city, "Listen, listen. tell Joab, come here, I want to speak to you. He came near her, and the woman said, are you Joab? He answered, I am. Then she said to him, listen to the words of your servant. He answered, I am listening. Then she said, they used to say in the old days, let them inquire at Abel, and so they would settle the matter. I am one of those who are peaceable and faithful in Israel. You seek to destroy a city that is a mother in Israel. Why will you swallow up the heritage of the Lord? Joab answered, far be it from me, far be it that I should swallow up or destroy. That is not the case. But a man of the hill country of Ephraim, called Sheba, son of Bichri, has lifted up his hand against King David. Give him up alone, and I will withdraw from the city. The woman said to Joab, his head shall be thrown over the wall to you. Then she's really a piece of work. Then the woman went to all the people with her wise plan, and they cut off the head of Sheba, son of Bichri, and threw it out to Joab. So he blew the trumpet, and they dispersed from the city and all went to their homes, while Joab returned to Jerusalem to the king.
All right, let's just finish the chapter and then we'll talk about it.
Okay, now Joab was in command of all the army of Israel. Benaiah, son of Jehoiada, was in command of the Cherethites and the Pelethites. Adoram was in charge of the forced slaver. Jehoshaphat, son of Ahilud, was the recorder. Sheba was secretary. Zadok and Abiathar were priests, and Ira the Jerite was also David's priest.
Okay, great. All right. So notice that there have been a number of occasions when a wise woman intervened. Can you remember any of them? Anybody remember who else?
Specifically in this section, or
No,
In the last few chapters.
wasn't there, didn't one of the wise women come to David and say, give him a plan?
Very good.
Basically, yeah.
Very good. So that was the wise woman of Tekoa, who, remember, she told him a story. And he realized that he needed to bring Absalom back. That was Joab's trick. So that was one wise. What about another one who said, don't do this. Don't do this violence. It's not going to be good for you in the future. That was Abigail. Remember Abigail?
Oh, yeah.
This is way back. But when, remember, David was running a protection racket, and Abigail's husband was rich and had all kinds of stuff. And David asked him for some of it, and he said, forget it. And David was all set to go kill him and steal the stuff. And she said, you don't want this blood on your hands because you're going to be king, and this is not a good idea. Now, this woman here, who, clearly is not a peacemaking person entirely, but she does not want the whole city to be destroyed because one guy needs to be tossed over. So, she has his head cut off and throws it up. Really, I mean, the violence, between the guy's belly being sliced and having his guts come out, and, the head being thrown over the wall. I mean, it's stunning. Mark, did you have your hand up before?
Yeah, I just, like you were saying, I just marvel at within 3 sentences, we go from a woman where obviously women are not necessarily recognized in Tanakh. And then we have a woman that's not only that men not pay attention to, but here's a wise woman. But then it's like, oh, maybe they're saying she's a wise woman because she's conniving and more streetwise than she is. That's almost like a backward compliment. Is it better to wait in line at, a sage's door than be an honored guest at the wise woman's house? Or something like that?
Be careful if you're a guest at her house. You might not have a head when you leave. But I think, I think the wisdom is to, okay, this guy needs to be sacrificed, but not everybody in the community. It's a certain kind of wisdom. It's the wisdom of, tribal warfare. Okay, so any other comments about this chapter? Because now we're going to go into what's more of a coda. Okay, so let me read to you what Alter wrote about chapters 21 to 24, which is the end of the book. He says, it appears to be a series of appendices to the David story, written by different writers in styles that exhibit notable differences from the main narrative. And we'll see how that is. And also certain differences in ideological assumptions, and even in what are presumed to be the narrative data of David's history. Now, but he says at the same time, keep in mind that creating a collage of disparate sources was an established literary technique. I mean, that's what the whole Tanakh is. It's a bunch of different things, kind of glued together like a collage. Recent critics have abundantly demonstrated the compositional coherence of chapters 21 to 24 and have argued for some significant links with the preceding narrative. For that reason, it may be preferable to think of this whole unit as a coda to the story rather than as a series of appendices. The structure of the chapters is nearly chiastic. Well, we don't want to go into all of that. I'd have to draw pictures for that to make sense. The temporal setting of these materials is unclear, but they seem to belong somewhere in the middle of David's career. So here we've been kind of chronological, and now all of a sudden we're sort of going back into some other time frame, and do not follow from the late point in his reign reported in the immediately preceding account of the rebellion of Sheba. The editors place these chapters here rather than after David's death, and then set the account of his last days, which they interrupt at the beginning of 1 Kings, in order to underline the dynastic continuity between David's story and Solomon's, which then immediately follows. That doesn't make sense to me, but whatever. Okay, so now we're going to look at what really, I think you'll notice that it doesn't seem all that consistent with what we've seen before. So we're going to start reading it and see, whether we notice any difference. We go down to chapter 21. Okay. So David avenges the Gibeonites. This is certainly not, what follows from what we just read. Do you want to keep reading, Jane, or?
I'll read unless somebody else wants to. Anybody can come in
Christine?
anytime.
Okay.
Yeah, let me do my
Christine?
bit.
Yeah.
Okay.
Go for it.
Okay. Now there was a famine in the days of David for 3 years, year after year. And David inquired of the Lord. The Lord said, there is blood guilt on Saul and on his house because he put the Gibeonites to death. So the king called the Gibeonites and spoke to them. Now the Gibeonites were not of the people of Israel, but of the remnant of the Amorites. Although the people of Israel had sworn to spare them, Saul had tried to wipe them out in his zeal for the people of Israel and Judah. David said to the Gibeonites, what shall I do for you? How can I make expiation that you may bless the heritage of the Lord? The Gibeonites said to him, it is not a matter of silver or gold between us and Saul or his house, neither is it for us to put anyone to death in Israel. He said, what do you say that I should do for you? They said to the king, the man who consumed us and planned to destroy us so that we should have no place in all the territory of Israel. Let 7 of his sons be handed over to us, and we will impale them before the Lord at Gibeon on the mountain of the Lord. The king said, I will hand them over.
So, we haven't had enough blood and guts. It's been a few verses. Let's have some more. This is Ivan the Terrible, guy from Romania. Yeah, I went to his castle and they told us about how he would eat dinner while people were being impaled.
Nice.
Lovely. So here, this idea that Saul was trying to kill the Gibeonites, massacred them. There is nothing in the Saul story to support that. Whether it ever happened or not, we don't know, but certainly in the story, it wasn't in there. So this is one of the proofs that Alter uses, one of many, to say this is a different author. Harvey, we are more DNA related to chimps than bonobos.
Huh?
Okay, I don't know what that was in reference to, maybe
Okay.
to the violence, Harvey, is
The
that what
violence,
you?
yeah, violence, because bonobos are a loving kind of
Oh,
animal,
that's it.
and,
Yeah.
and they're actually led by women. And chimps are bloodthirsty and they
Oh.
kill each other, and they're really nasty.
Which would really make it bizarre that remember there was a woman who, I think it was actually, I think she was a psychologist or something, but she had a baby chimp that she brought up.
Yeah, and it ate her face.
It ate her friend's face.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah. So, excuse me, but these are not like little hairy, humans,
Good
even
time
though
for
we have
moms,
some
though.
of their traits within us, definitely.
Yeah. Well, I think
Also,
history is enough.
the other thing is David going to inquire of the Lord is not like what David's done in the past. So this
Right.
is all, very different style, a lot of things. All right. So now they're going to hand over these guys and they're going to impale them. Okay. Please continue.
Right, but the king spared Mephibosheth, the son of Saul's son Jonathan, because of the oath of the Lord that was between them, between David and Jonathan, son of Saul. The king took the two sons of Rizpah, daughter of Aiah, whom she bore to Saul, Armoni and Mephibosheth, and the 5 sons of Merab, daughter of Saul, whom she bore to Adriel, son of Barzillai, the Meholathite. He gave them into the hands of the Gibeonites, and they impaled them on the mountain before the Lord. The 7 of them perished together. They were put to death in the first days of harvest, at the beginning of the barley harvest. Nice. Then,
Great way to start that. By the way, let me
Pagan?
just stop.
That is so pagan to
Oh,
do
God.
that.
yeah,
Who
the-
said that, we got beyond our pagan roots?
yeah,
I was talking to someone the other day about their wedding, and I said, we break the glass as a way to scare off the evil spirits. Hey,
Yeah.
I thought we weren't superstitious. By the way, this business about the famine, because there's blood guilt on Saul, etc. This idea that, this is back to the Deuteronomic, like you're
Right.
getting punished for being, this is not the theology that we've been following at
Right.
all up till now, right?
yeah,
It is not, and really the focus has been much more on realpolitik rather than on, God intervening or whatever, except to the extent that God intervenes to support David, but not in any direct way, right? I mean, David is a warrior. He is able to conquer the land and to kill the enemy and all of that. And it's not, it's not God that intervenes. And here, all of a sudden, we have God intervening, punishing the people because of what happened to Saul's family. Mark.
Couple things real quick. It says, what's gold and silver between friends? We don't need gold and silver, but it's like hand over a couple relatives and we'll all be fine.
Right.
Also, it's a harvest. Isn't that like a festival that people come 30, 40 miles? I mean,
Probably.
they're being killed. It's almost like Sweeps Week or something like that, on TV, or, it's the peak, it's the Emmy Award winning season. Everybody's in temple. And oh wait, we're going to kill some people, or we're going to see some death.
And not only that, what Alter says about it, that the beginning of the barley harvest, this would be in April, the bereaved Rizpah then watches over the corpses throughout the hot months of the summer until the rain returns, heralding the end of the long famine in the fall. So presumably, once again, here are these people being impaled and just rotting away while people are harvesting their barley. It's pretty gruesome.
And if it were in California, the rain wouldn't come. So,
Yeah, it would be years. It's really disgusting. Okay. As I said, this is what should be banned, not the other books.
but also the gold and silver, that's the standard compensation stuff, this
Yeah.
really. And basically, while they're saying that, we don't want your gold and silver, they're saying this is too grievous for the usual compensations. Basically, we want blood.
Okay, this again, here is what Alter says about this business about, okay, so they don't want the money. They want the Israelites to be handed over. See, he says, whatever you say, I shall do for you. David's submissiveness to the Gibeonites reflects a notion of causation and the role of human action scarcely evident in the main narrative. In other words, something happened, we have to do something to make it stop, right? A famine grips the land because its former ruler violated a national vow. Collective disaster can be averted only by the expiatory, indeed sacrificial offering of human lives.
Yeah.
This is like, as you said, pagan, Canaanite, right? You have to offer human beings as sacrifice in order to, atone for your sin. This archaic world of divine retribution and ritual response is very far from the historical realm of realpolitik in which the story of David has been playing out. It's just very, very different. And then as far as the impaling, he says there's no scholarly consensus on the exact form of execution, except that it obviously involves exhibiting the corpses. Some understand it as a kind of crucifixion. Either way, it's hideous. Okay, so now.
Then Rizpah, the daughter of Aiah, took sackcloth and spread it on a rock for herself from the beginning of harvest until rain fell on them from the heavens. She did not allow the birds of the air to come on the bodies by day or the wild animals by night. When David was told what Rizpah, the daughter of Aiah, the concubine of Saul, had done, David went and took the bones of Saul and the bones of his son Jonathan from the people of Jabesh Gilead, who had stolen them from the public square of Bethshan, where the Philistines had hung them up on the day the Philistines killed Saul on Gilboa. He brought them up from there, the bones of Saul and the bones of his son Jonathan, and they gathered the bones of those who had been impaled. They buried the bones of Saul and of his son Jonathan in the land of Benjamin in Zelah, in the tomb of his father Kish, and they did all that the king commanded. After that, God heeded supplications for the land.
So the famine ends not only when these people are killed and offered as a ritual sacrifice, but when Saul and his son are properly buried.
And so are the impaled.
Yeah.
I mean, that's also significant.
Yeah, as I said, they don't get a proper burial, which is just really, very, very against what, is recommended in the rest of the Tanakh. Go ahead, Jane.
So there's a book, a very, very good book by Yoki Brandis, who I keep referring to, called The Secret Book of Kings. And it is based on this chapter. And her thesis is that this was engineered by David to get rid of all the children of Saul, especially the sons of Saul, because he's so weak now that he fears that he would be overthrown. How to make sure that people won't turn back to a son of Saul and install that person in his place.
Interesting.
It's a really interesting book.
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't put it past David.
English. It's in English.
I wouldn't put that past David.
Yeah, I wouldn't either. So it if you use her premise, then this book really is an integral part of 2 Samuel,
right?
Because it shows his political plotting.
Yeah, and he could be using his so-called, consulting with, the oracle.
Yeah.
As an excuse. Yeah, that would work.
Right,
that would definitely work.
Only he is going to hear what the oracle has to say.
Exactly.
And I wouldn't trust David as far as I could throw him. So
that's an interesting theory. Yeah, thank you for that.
Great book, by the way, if you want to read a really good historical novel.
Can you put the name of the book and the title in the chat so people can take it down?
Okay, let me lower my hand.
Okay, so we're gonna go back.
How do I write in the chat?
Do you see where it says chat at the very bottom?
Oh, at the chat. Oh,
yeah, click on that and then.
Oh, I will. Okay, here it is.
Thank you. All right. So let's go down to
the Philistines. Oh, wait. Yeah, the Philistines went to war again with Israel, and David went down together with his servants. They fought against the Philistines, and David grew weary. Ishi-Benob, I love these names.
I know.
One of the descendants of the giants, whose spear weighed 300 shekels of bronze, God, that's pretty heavy, and who was fitted out with new weapons, said he would kill David. But Abishai, the son of Zeruiah, came to his aid and attacked the Philistine and killed him. Then David's men swore to him, "You shall not go out with us to battle any longer, so that you do not quench the lamp of Israel." After this, a battle took place with the Philistines at Gob. Then Sibbecai, the Hushathite, killed Saph, who was one of the descendants of the giants. Then there was another battle with the Philistines at Gob, and Elhanan, the son of Jaar Oragim, the Bethlehemite, killed Goliath the Gittite, the shaft of whose spear was like a weaver's beam. There was again a war at Gath, where there was a man of great size who had 6 fingers on each hand and 6 toes on each foot, 24 in number. He too was descended from the giants. When he taunted Israel, Jonathan, the son of David's brother Shimei, killed him. These 4 were descended from the giants. All right, we got it. In Gath, they fell by the hands of David and his servants.
So, okay, we thought David killed the
Yeah.
giant.
Hello, yeah,
So obviously, this is another tradition of some kind
yeah.
that they have.
Who are
to-
these giants?
I don't know, but giant is in the eye of the beholder. They might have just been maybe 6 feet tall or something, but in
but-
those days that was tall, really.
But why
tall.
don't they have like a tribal name or something?
I don't know. I
It's so
do not
weird.
know.
Yeah,
Or they're
But-
defined.
But as I said, we thought David killed Goliath, and here we have
Yeah.
a whole different tradition.
yeah.
So this is another.
How do we know it's the same Goliath?
Well, how many Goliaths at Gath are there?
And how
Well,
many
you
were
know, you
Gittites?
could name, I could see him using the name in commemoration of the original Goliath. and
Okay, well, I suppose there are different ways of reading this,
Mhm.
and that's fine. But it's also like, and then he killed him and he killed him. It's not sort of all that exciting, but okay. Any comments before we go on to the next chapter? Is an actual poem or a psalm, really. This is very similar to Psalm 18. Now, theoretically, David is the author of the Psalms. That's most probably apocryphal. It's a nice idea, but David ain't the type to write poetry, I don't think, but and they believe that, this is sort of almost at the end of the book. It's not quite at the end of the book, but almost. There are only 2 more chapters. So we started with a poem of Hannah, if you can remember that far back, when she said, she was barren, and she said, if I have a son, I'll dedicate him to God. And so there's sort of a nice beginning and ending with poetry at the beginning and poetry at the end. And also, they think this poem was probably written, well, the second part they think was written in the 10th century, which is around David's time. This part later. So, does somebody want to read the poem? If
I
not,
can
I'll
go
just,
on.
okay, go ahead. Go ahead.
David spoke to the Lord the words of this song on the day when the Lord delivered him from the hands of all his enemies and from the hand of Saul. He said, "The Lord is my rock, my fortress, and my deliverer, my God, my rock in whom I take refuge, my shield and the horn of my salvation, my stronghold and my refuge, my Savior. You save me from violence. I call upon the Lord, who is worthy to be praised, and I am saved from my enemies."
I mean, we didn't really see David doing any kind of
Any of
thank
that.
you,
Right.
any thank you to God for anything, right? But anyway, it's,
Okay. Oh, well. For the waves of death encompassed me, the torrents of perdition assailed me, the cords of Sheol entangled me, and the snares of death confronted me. In my distress, I called upon the Lord, and to my God I called. From his temple he heard my voice, and my cry came to his ears. Then the earth reeled and rocked. The foundations of the heavens trembled and reeled because he was angry. Smoke went up from his nostrils and devouring flame from his mouth. Glowing coals flamed forth from him. He bowed the heavens and came down. Thick darkness was under his feet. He rode on a cherub and flew. Rode on a cherub?
well,
Okay.
remember, cherubs are not cute little puffy
I was-
cheeked angels. They have wings and they're kind of nasty.
Oh, good. Okay.
And
I
it's
was
sometimes
getting
the,
a little
the
worried
thing
about
that,
God.
that gods fly on.
Okay. And he was seen on the upon the wings of the wind. He made darkness around him a canopy, thick clouds, a gathering of water. Out of the brightness before him, coals of fire flamed forth. The Lord thundered from heaven. The Most High uttered his voice. He sent out arrows and scattered them, lightning and routed them. Then the channels of the sea were seen. The foundations of the world were laid bare at the rebuke of the Lord, at the blast of the breath of his nostrils. He reached from on high. He took me. He drew me out of mighty waters. He delivered me from my strong enemy, from those who hated me, for they were too mighty for me. They came upon me in the day of my calamity, but the Lord was my stay. He brought me out into a broad place. He delivered me because he delighted in me. Is there more?
Oh, there are pages and pages.
Oh, okay. The Lord reward. Okay. Okay. What did I volunteer for? The Lord rewarded me according to my righteousness. According to the cleanness of my hands, he recompensed me. For I have kept the ways of the Lord and have not wickedly departed from my God. For all his ordinances were before me, and from his statutes I did not turn aside. I was blameless before him, and I kept myself from guilt. Therefore, the Lord has recompensed me according to my righteousness, according to my cleanness in his sight.
So let's just remember that a person as clean as this was not David.
No.
I mean, the fact that he is, clean and has done no turning aside from God's commandments, hardly, right? Especially at this point.
I have a question.
Also,
Yeah.
Rabbi,
Yeah.
also, Rabbi, it says that in the beginning of the poem that God is in a temple. And David was specifically prohibited from building the temple for God because he was so stained with blood.
Right.
This section must be later.
Yes, that's what
Yeah.
author believes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But you said one section was written
the second
around
part,
the
I was
time.
reading ahead. We're not there yet. Yeah.
Also-
The next chapter is the next part of the poem, and that one was supposedly written more around the time of King David, but this one is definitely later.
What's all this thing about the statues of God? Because seems like
Yeah.
counter to the notions of like no graven images, da, 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 da. I mean, that seems very odd.
Well, don't forget that there are traces still even in the Torah of a different kind of theology, right? We have, you shall have no other gods before me in the 10 Commandments. What does that mean? Right?
Yeah.
Well, there are no other gods. How can I have other gods before me? Well, in those days, people had other gods.
Sure.
And also the Michamocha,
Yeah.
who is like you among the gods?
Among
Now,
gods.
it gets translated very often as who is like you among the divine beings to kind of skirt, that issue of what do you mean, who is like you among the gods? So I've mentioned before that the scholars believe we went from polytheism, not directly to monotheism, but to monolatry. Monolatry being a belief that our God is the most powerful and best God.
Primary one.
Monotheism doesn't really come along until Isaiah. Before that, there's clearly, and the Israelites keep straying, and they go off and worship other gods, and they have the Asherah and the whole thing, so we're not there yet here. The other thing is that this idea of a mountain god is also pagan.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. That God is, in the mountains or whatever.
Isn't that where the word El comes from? El is supposed to be the name for
Mountain.
God of the mountains. When we say
I'm not
El
sure.
Shaddai.
I'm not sure,
thought
but
that
we
was the God of the
certainly
mountains.
brought in a lot of the nomenclature from the Canaanites. Baal was a god, right? Now it means, master, but we call God the Baal of, the master of.
Lynn has
Yeah.
her hand up.
I'm sorry?
Lynn has her hand up.
Oh, okay, Lynn.
I was looking for the exact verse it came in, but I remember one of the things that you read as statue was really statute, like law.
Oh, Well, that's nice.
I can't find where it is. I'm looking right now. I know, I
Well, that
noticed
makes a
that
difference.
at the time you were saying it, because people often.
Oh, yeah, yeah, it's verse
Ah.
23, verse 23.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
So there aren't statues, but the idea of this sort of deified mountain is definitely,
Yeah.
you know, related to
Totally.
Semitic gods. But thanks for that clarification, Lynn.
Great.
So, as I said, this is very different from the David story, and of course, different from what we consider to be our, religion or whatever, in terms of some of these references. Okay, let's see. Yeah, we have a little time left. Let's try to get through this. I think this is where we are.
Where are we? Yes. With the loyal, you show yourself loyal. With the blameless, you show yourself blameless. With the pure, you show yourself pure. And with the crooked, you show yourself shrewd. You deliver a humble people, but your eyes are upon the haughty to bring them down. Indeed, you are my lamp, O Lord. The Lord lightens my darkness. By you, I can outrun a troop, and by my God, I can leap over a wall. This God, his way is perfect. The promise of the Lord proves true. He is a shield for all who take refuge in him.
Okay, so for those who are taking the Book of Job class,
Yeah.
here is that Deuteronomic theology that has not at all been
Quid pro
part
quo.
of the story.
Yeah.
Okay, if you're good, God is going to show all sorts of wonderful things to you. And if you're bad, you are going to be taken down, right?
Mhm.
And that is not at all how the story has gone. And
For who?
God,
I'm sorry.
I was just going to say God is perfect. Yeah, go ahead.
For who is God but the Lord, and who is a rock except our God? The God who has girded me with strength has opened wide my path. He made my feet like the feet of deer and set me secure on the heights. He trains my hands for war so that my arms can bend a bow of bronze. Wow. You have, that's something. You have given me the shield of your salvation, and your help has made me great. You have made me stride freely, and my feet do not slip. I pursued my enemies and destroyed them and did not turn back until they were consumed. I consumed them. I struck them down so they did not rise. They fell under my feet. For you girded me with the strength for battle. You made my assailants sink under me. You made my enemies turn their backs to me, those who hated me, and I destroyed them. They looked, but there was no one to save them. They cried to the Lord, but he did not answer them. Where are we? Okay.
43.
I beat them fine like the dust of the earth. I crushed them and stamped them down like the mire of the streets.
Okay, I'm going to move it all the way here.
Okay. You delivered me from the strife of the peoples. You kept me as the head of the nations. The people whom I had not known served me. The foreigners came cringing to me, and as soon as they heard of me, they obeyed me. Foreigners lost heart and came trembling out of their strongholds. The Lord lives. Blessed be my rock, and exalted be my God, the God of my salvation, the God who gave me vengeance and brought down peoples under me, who brought me out from my enemies. You exalted me above my adversaries. You delivered me from the violent. That's not very well there.
Yeah.
For this I will extol you, O Lord, among the nations, and sing praises to your name. He is a tower of salvation for his king and shows steadfast love to his anointed, to David and his descendants forever. This is a really bloody poem,
It's, it could be something that is, helpful to people who feel besieged by things in their lives, that
Right.
God is there and God will take care of you and all of that if you believe in God. But it just does not fit David's personality or his experience at all.
Well, vengeance is not exactly something.
Yeah, and God, is going to pursue your enemies for you and help you, slaughter them. Again, we have had no indication of that in the story. Unless people want to comment on this, I'd like to go on to the next piece because I find this ending not as interesting as the story. And this is the part that is supposedly written in the 10th century. So it's supposed to be an archaic poem. And do you want to keep reading, or Jane, do you want to pick it up?
I'll pick it up. Now, these are the last words of David. The oracle of David, son of Jesse, the oracle of the man whom God exalted, the anointed of the God of Jacob, the favorite of the strong one of Israel. The Spirit of the Lord speaks through me. His word is upon my tongue. The God of Israel has spoken. The Rock of Israel has said to me, one who rules over people justly, ruling in the fear of God, is like the light of morning, like the sun rising on a cloudless morning, gleaming from the rain on the grassy land. Whoops. Is not my house like this with God? For he has made with me an everlasting covenant, ordered in all things and secure. Will he not cause to prosper all my help and my desire? But the godless are like thorns that are thrown away, for they cannot be picked up with the hand. To touch them, one uses an iron bar or the shaft of a spear, and they are entirely consumed in fire on the spot.
Again, a very Deuteronomic theology here, right?
Mhm.
Bad people get punished and good people get supported. What I'm going to do is I'm going to just quickly read this ending here because it's just a lot of annoying names that are really hard to pronounce. So here's a list of warriors that again is apparently an ancient form during David's time. So maybe it was written during his time, maybe not, we don't know, but it's more likely that it was. These are the names of the warriors whom David had. Josheb-Bashebet, a Tachmonite. He was chief of the three. He wielded a spear against 800 whom he killed at one time. Next to him among the three warriors was Eleazar, son of Dodo, son of Ahohi. He was with David when they defied the Philistines who were gathered there for battle. The Israelites withdrew, but he stood his ground. He struck down the Philistines until his arm grew weary. Though his hand clung to the sword, the Lord brought about a great victory that day. Then the people came back to him, but only to strip the dead. Lovely, like let's strip the dead of all their, jewels and credit cards, whatever. Next to him was Shema, son of Adi, the Hararite. The Philistines gathered together at Lehi, where there was a plot of ground full of lentils, and the army fled from the Philistines. But he took his stand in the middle of the plot, defended it, and killed the Philistines, and the Lord brought about a great victory. Toward the beginning of harvest, 3 of the 30 chiefs went down to join David at the cave of Adullam, while a band of Philistines was encamped in the valley of Rephaim. David was then in the stronghold, and the garrison of the Philistines was then at Bethlehem. David said longingly, "Oh, that someone would give me water to drink from the well of Bethlehem that is by the gate." Then the 3 warriors broke through the camp of the Philistines, drew water from the well of Bethlehem that was by the gate, and brought it to David. But he would not drink of it. He poured it out to the Lord, for he said, "The Lord forbid that I should do this. Can I drink the blood of the men who went at the risk of their lives?" Therefore, he would not drink it. The 3 warriors did these things. Now, Abishai, son of Zeruiah, the brother of Joab, was chief of the 30. With his spear, he fought against 300 men and killed them, and won a name beside the 3. He was the most renowned of the 30 and became their commander, but he did not attain to the 3. Benai, son of Jehoiada, was a valiant warrior from Kabzeel, a doer of great deeds. He struck down 2 sons of Ariel of Moab. He also went down and killed a lion in a pit on a day when snow had fallen. And he killed an Egyptian, a handsome man. The Egyptian had a spear in his hand, but Benaiah went against him with a staff, snatched the spear out of the Egyptian's hand, and killed him with his own spear. Such were the things Benaiah, son of Jehoiada, did, and won a name beside the 3 warriors. He was renowned among the 30, but he did not attain to the 3. And David put him in charge of his bodyguard. Among the 30 were Asahel, brother of Joab, Elhanan, son of Dodo of Bethlehem, Shema of Harod, Elika of Harod, Helez the Paltite, Ira, son of Ikesh of Tekoa, Abiezer of Anathoth, Mebunai the Hushathite, Zalman the Ahohite, Maharai of Netophah, Heleb, son of Baana of Netophah, Itai, son of Ribai of Gibeah of the Benjaminites, Benaiah of Piraton, Hiddai of the Wadis of Gash, Abi Alban the Arbatite, Asmaveth of Bahurim, Eliahba of Shalbon, the sons of Jashen, Jonathan, son of Shammah the Hararite, Ahiam, son of Sharar the Hararite, Eliphelet, son of Ahazbai of Makkah, Eliab, son of Ahitophel the Gilonite, Hezro of Carmel, Parai the Arbite, Egal, son of Nathan of Zobah, Bani the Gadite, Zelek the Ammonite, Naharai of Beroth, the armor bearer of Joab, son of Zeruiah, Ira the Ithrite, Gareb the Ithrite, Uriah the Hittite, 37 in all. Okay, so we now know who all the warriors were. And there's one more chapter that we will not get to today to end the second book of Samuel. And that's a narrative, which is, more interesting than just a list of warriors. But again, very strange theology that does not comport at all with what we've had before and with anything that the Torah tells us we're supposed to do. Which just shows you that there's all this leftover stuff that exists, and it was not, the people who put together the Tanakh didn't feel any need to make things be consistent or to not have contradiction. Just wasn't their, headspace, shall we say. Any final comments or questions?
I could see where this would happen, particularly when the Tanakh was written and finally put together, because you have people fleeing from the north coming into the south because of the Assyrians, etc., all those conquests of the north. And, there's still that animosity between north and south. So I think that when we get these anomalous sections, some faction has gained control that,
Yes.
wasn't part of the main narrative. But I can
I think there's also an attempt to be inclusive.
Yeah.
And
like
also
might forget all this stuff. I mean, reading these names, having these names means nothing to us because we never meet these people again.
Right.
But it's a list, just in case we forget.
Right.
Yeah.
But I think also including the narratives that are sometimes contradictory from different sources is a way also to be inclusive and to sort of show different perspectives of the truth. Like there's no truth, right? If again, I always go back to the first two chapters of Genesis. You start off with this grand scheme of God, bringing things into being through the word and separating things and putting things in their place. And then you get a very different narrative and it's a big mess because you got human beings involved and it's a different order. So some people will say, well, it's just the first chapter is the, wide angle and the next chapter is the more close up. Or you could say they're different sources. It doesn't matter because really in the end, this is what we have. And it gives you the two perspectives on God. The one is God being transcendent and beyond our capacity to really understand. And then the second being much more about God being immanent, the God with whom we can have a personal relationship. And, someone decided, well, maybe we should toss in a psalm here since we think we want to say David wrote the psalm. So let's at least have a psalm in here, right? So we don't, how do we justify that David wrote the Psalms unless we throw one in here? And, we know that the story is cleaned up later in the, Chronicles. So let's posit the idea that David is blameless, or at least he thinks so. This is supposedly written by him, I'm great, I'm blameless, and therefore everything went my way. Well, things kind of went his way in some ways, not in all ways. And then even though God did make a covenant with David that's supposed to be an everlasting covenant, the fact is we have no David on the throne, nobody from his family, and haven't for a long, long time. So we will resume this in a couple of weeks. I hadn't originally slated a Saturday in June, but I will do that, one more in June. So we can at least begin the Book of Kings and see, and maybe finish David's story. Anyway, Shabbat Shalom, everybody.
Shabbat Shalom.